All right. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight for our second session of our rules webinars. Today we will be going over free relief rules. Our presenter today is PGA professional Mr. Clark Lewis. Mr. Lewis is the head professional up at Valley Country Club in Sugarloaf, Pennsylvania, where he's been since 1979. He's a member of the National Rules Committee and is the chairman of the Philadelphia PGA Section Rules Committee. So just a couple housekeeping things for our webinar today. We will be recording, and so we ask that you mute yourself. It looks like everyone's muted, so that's great, just so we don't have some background noise. There's one button I want everyone to avoid hitting. That is the Present Now button in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Later, that will interrupt the presentation if you do click that, so please refrain from clicking that. Like I mentioned, we will be recording today's webinar, and we will later be posting both today's session as well as session 1 from last week on the Philadelphia Section YouTube page. We'll be sending out a link to those as well later this week, so keep an eye out for those if you did miss session 1, and if you're joining us for session 2 and you want to come back and really need a refresher on a couple of rules, that's great as well. If you have any troubleshooting issues, please put those questions into the chat feature, and I'll do my best to help you through those. Just be aware, most of the time it's an internet connection problem. If you joined us last week, you know we had a little bit of internet trouble as well, and today we hope to not have any. So just go ahead and put those questions in the chat feature, and I'll try to do my best to help you. While Mr. Lewis is presenting, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and use the raise your hand feature. It's in the bottom white bar there. And if you choose to raise your hand, then we'll call on you once we kind of complete maybe that segment. I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Lewis to open this evening with God Bless America. He is the unofficial vocalist of our section, so it's become tradition for him to open up our meetings in song. All right, so Mr. Lewis, take it away.
As the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us pledge allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair, as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you, Clark. So we're going to go ahead and get started.
I was just saying, if they were singing, hopefully they were singing along with me and they went for the high note.
I was in my head. I probably couldn't hit that high note as well as you, though.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and start off by going over that pre-quiz that we asked everyone to take. It is the same quiz that we went over last week, but just in case anyone wasn't on last week's session, we can go ahead and quickly go through that. So I'm going to pull that up. All right, okay. Can you see that? Can you see the pre-quiz, Clark? Okay, great. So just a couple insights for summary. Our average was almost a 7 out of 10, but there were 3 frequently missed questions that majority of you got wrong. Question 1 was, a leaf sticking to a ball is a loose impediment, true or false? 2 was, a player whose ball is farthest from the hole is said to have the honor, true or false? And the third question was, what are the 5 parts of the golf course? So we can go through each of those individual questions now.
Okay, the first question says, a leaf sticking to a ball is a loose impediment. Well, you might think so, because leaves are loose impediments. They're natural objects, such as leaves, stones, twigs, things of that nature, but not they're not considered to be loose impediments when they are sticking to the golf ball. And so that's why that question is false. Now, this question says a player whose ball is farthest from the hole is said to have the, in quotes, honor. Well, that would be true on the tee. You have the honor on the tee if you've scored lower on the previous hole, or if the committee, the first hole, has named you the person to start, you have the honor. But in this case, the player who's farthest from the hole on the rest of the play of the hole is said to be away. So that was false. And then this question says, an island of grass growing in the bunker is part of the bunker. That's not true. That's false. An island of grass in the bunker is part of the general area. So that question is false. Or can't see that. I'm sorry. Okay. And now this question says a ball is lost if it is not found within 3 minutes. And that question is true. That's correct. Used to be 5 minutes. Now you only get 3 minutes. And after that 3-minute period, if you play your original ball, if somehow you find your original ball and you play it, you have played a wrong ball and you'll be penalized. This question says a ball is lost.
Sorry, I just switched it back for you because we're still talking about it.
The penalty for a lost ball is 2 strokes. Well, it might seem to be 2 strokes, but it's really what we call stroke and distance. It's 1 stroke and the distance you would cover with that stroke. So that question was false. And this question says penalty areas may be marked red or yellow. This is an easier one, and that's true. Information on distance or rules is not considered advice. And that is true because, you know, you could be penalized for giving advice. For example, if you were standing on a par 3 hole in some of the tournaments that you guys are playing in, and you stroke play, and you asked your fellow competitor, if you asked them what club he used, that would be a rules violation. But these things, anything has to do with distance, because that's common knowledge, distances, and so are the rules. So that's not considered to be advice. You wouldn't get penalized for those. Okay.
Looks like everyone actually got this one right. A score of 6 on a par 4 is called a bogey. Correct?
Yeah, that was the gimme in the group, and that's true. It's a double bogey, something we hope we never get. This one says out of bounds should be defined by white lines and stakes, and that's true. Once again, whenever you see the word should, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be that way, but they're recommending that you do it that way. I suppose someplace, I was at one golf course many, many years ago where they were defining parts of the out of bounds with blue stakes. It's very unusual. They're mostly always defined by white stakes or lines. And the 5 parts of the golf course, we know that there are 5 parts of the golf. Before the rules changed, there were 4 parts, but they separated bunkers from penalty areas. So now we have 5 parts of the golf course. We have the general area, we have the teeing ground, the teeing area, the putting green, penalty areas, and bunkers. Those are the 5 parts.
All right. So that kind of goes over our quiz. Does anyone have any questions on any of those questions? If not, we'll go ahead and start our presentation.
And we're going to be talking about these are situations where you're going to get what we call relief. And we know relief means that you're going to be able to do something to make things a little easier for you. And this is going to be relief that doesn't cost you a stroke. Like when you go into a penalty area, you're going to get relief from that, but you're going to have to pay a stroke penalty. These are areas where you will get relief, but it won't cost a penalty. Okay. We have an overview here. We're talking with, once again, we're going to talk about loose impediments. We have a lot. We have a definition and everything. Movable obstructions, ball or ball marker. Sometimes we know that a ball or a ball marker can help or interfere with play. You have abnormal course conditions. There's 4 of those. And then you have dangerous animal conditions. And yes, there are some dangerous animals on the golf course sometimes. And then we have something that we all need to know about, especially is the embedded ball, especially in the spring when things are muddy and our ball is embedded in a pitch mark. You have to know how to deal with that. And sometimes you're able to actually lift your ball to see if it's in one of these conditions, one of these types of conditions. And I must say, I know that some of these words, I know we have a large, our age range is great here. And am I being heard?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Someone saw my mic being off there, and I guess so. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Yeah, I have to do this by telephone because because I'm living in an area that is prehistoric when it comes to Wi-Fi, and they're doing something to fix it. But so that's why we have to do that. But hopefully you can all hear me.
We can all hear you. Yep. If there was a problem,
okay,
I'd let you know.
All right, good. Well, I saw there was a question, like a chat thing, and said they couldn't hear me. Okay.
Okay.
So and sometimes you can lift that ball to see if you're in some of these conditions. And as I started to say, this is tough stuff to learn. There are huge words here that you may not be used to. These are the presentations that we use to teach adults in the USGA PGA rules workshops. And Tom Karpus, who will be joining us shortly, sort of condensed some of these rules to make it a little bit easier for you guys to learn these. Okay, so we'll continue. So now once again, there's the over. Now sometimes we'll be talking about, we'll have a definition of loose impediments. Sometimes you can remove the loose impediments, and we're going to tell you what to do when the ball moves when you are removing loose impediments. That sometimes can cause a penalty, sometimes not. Okay, now these are the changes. The rules of golf changed back in 2009, going into 2019, and there was some significant change. The ball now you may move loose impediments, these natural objects such as twigs, stones, and things like that, anywhere on the course. In bunkers, you can move them. You can move them in penalty areas, on the teeing ground. We can continue along, and putting green, of course, and there would be no penalty. Here we go.
Okay. So
here's our here's our actual definition of loose impediments. The loose impediments, they're not considered to be loose if they're attached. In other words, if let's say you had a tree limb and there was part of it had broken off, but it was still attached, that is not a loose impediment. And if they're growing, for example, grass or trees that are growing, or flowers, things like that, can't remove those. Or if they're solidly embedded in the ground, that means they're in the ground so much, they're sticking in the ground so that you can't pick them out easily. You can't flick them out with your finger. Or, as we said before, if they're sticking to the golf ball. That was part of our question in our quiz that we had before. Okay, we can move on. Now, sand and loose soil on the golf course are not loose impediments. So if your ball is in a sandy area,
You can't just go and pick up those little pieces of sand and move them away because they are part of the golf course. Now, loose soil, same way. Dew, sometimes if you're playing in the morning, like you see these footprints here, or frost, or water, they are not considered to be loose impediments. I have some special cases here. Here you see some snow over here. Snow, this is a hard definition to kind of get into your head, but snow and natural ice can either be temporary water, what we used to call casual water, or they can be loose impediments and that's at the discretion of the player. So if your ball was in that snowbank there, you could now drop away from it and call it temporary water, take a drop, or you could remove some of those the pieces of snow, and that would be okay too, because that would be considered a loose impediment. You could move it. But if your ball moves in that situation, you would be penalized. You'd have to replace it. Okay. Now, this is interesting. Spider webs, and we had a lot of discussion about spiders at the USGA and PGA. Spider webs are loose impediments, even though they are attached. Even though we said before that tree limbs that are attached are not loose impediments, but spider webs are, and you can remove them if you really want to go in and do that. Now, loose impediments may be removed anywhere, as this young lady is doing, on or off the course. And you can do it in any way. For example, if let's say you have a lot of leaves on the green. Used to be years ago, you had to go in there and just pick each leaf by hand and take it away. And we have a much better way now. You can remove it with your hat or with a towel. You can move it in any way. Now, there's two exceptions. You can't move loose impediments where a ball must be replaced. And when we say the word replace, that means the ball is going to be put back to a place where it was before. You can't remove loose impediments when you're playing in an area where the ball must be replaced. And it also applies during when play is stopped, let's say as a rain delay. And that does not apply on the putting green. When you're on the putting green, you can move those loose impediments with reckless abandon. Now, you can't move loose impediments to affect a ball in motion. So if a ball is rolling, you can't run up and remove a tree limb on the ground that might affect where that ball ends up. You would be penalized if you did that. Now, are there any questions about loose impediments, the definition or removing of them? All right, I guess we can go on. Now, what happens when you remove loose impediments and your ball moves? You see this ball is sitting on a leaf here. Well, I don't think I'd be removing that leaf because that's not on the putting green. And so what if that was on the putting green and you could move the leaf, be no problem. But anywhere else, if you move that, and now surely the ball would move and you'd be penalized. The ball must be replaced. And you would have a one-stroke penalty. Not on the putting green, and not in the teeing ground. Okay, I'm coming back. Okay. Now here are the exceptions. On the putting green, the teeing area, or when you're searching for a ball. Now this is a new thing. Let's suppose we're searching for our golf ball in an area of high grass. We can't see where it is. And suddenly we kick it or move it. In the past, that was a penalty. The ball had to be replaced. But now there's no penalty. And the ball must be replaced as close as possible to where you think it was. Now, if you were walking down the fairway and your ball was in plain sight, and somehow or other you kicked it or moved it, that would be a penalty. Okay, that's the during search part. Any questions about that?
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So we'll
Did someone
talk
have a
now
question?
about, go ahead.
Wasn't sure if someone had a question. Nope, looks like we're okay.
Okay, good. And if your parents are here listening in, don't be afraid to ask a question. We're never too old to learn. So we have these are definitions we're going to go over of obstructions and movable obstructions. They're different. We're going to talk about removing a movable obstruction. We're going to talk about relief for a ball that is in or on a movable obstruction. And we're going to talk, suppose we know our ball's in a movable obstruction, but we can't find it. We're going to talk about that. And all these situations occur. Here we have an artificial object. This is a cart path. That gentleman is standing on a cart path. Unless that cart path was declared by the committee to be an integral part of the golf course, or it indicated a boundary, or there are boundary objects such as boundary stakes. Sometimes the lining of a penalty area, water area, in stone. Sometimes that's declared to be an integral object. That wouldn't be an obstruction from which you would, and so you wouldn't get relief from it. And a movable obstruction is obviously an obstruction that can be moved with reasonable effort without damaging the obstruction or without damaging the golf course. Okay, we can move. For example, that young lady sitting on a bench. Stakes, except boundary objects. Golf carts, waste containers, benches, all those things, those are movable obstructions because you can move them easily. And of course, rakes, movable obstructions. Those are part of the definition, okay? Now, they may be moved without penalty anywhere on or off the course. There's a gentleman moving a ball washer. Okay? And two exceptions. Tee markers, before you play the hole, may not be moved. They are considered to be, if you move the tee marker before you tee off, you could be subject to a penalty. Okay? Now, or if you remove something to an obstruction to deliberately affect the ball in motion. There's a ball here rolling down a hill, and this looks like a caddy. He removed a rake so that the ball wouldn't go in the penalty area. That's a penalty to the player that he's caddying for. Now, here's a rake, and it's a movable obstruction. You see that ball is up against the rake. If that ball moves, there's no penalty. You should mark its position. You should put a T there to mark the position of the ball because you're going to have to replace it. So you would replace it on its original spot once you remove the rake. If the ball doesn't move, you just play it. If it moves, and if you don't know the original spot, let's say you just weren't paying attention, then you would estimate it and replace it on that spot. In other words, you put it back. Now, suppose your ball ends up on a movable obstruction. So maybe it lands on a towel, which is the situation here. So the ball's in it or on it. Now you're going to pick the ball up and you're going to remove the movable obstruction and you're going to drop the ball directly under, your reference point is directly under where that ball was when it was on the obstruction. Now you see that famous area there, that's relief area, and we know about that. That's something we really must know. That's the club length relief area, that arc that goes all the way around your reference point. Okay. And it tells you now that the reference point has to be in the same area of the golf course. It can't be any nearer the hole. These are things that I think you know by now when you're out there now, that it's that arc, okay? Now, if it's in or on an obstruction, let's say it's on the putting green. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pick that ball up, and we're going to pick the movable obstruction up, and then what are we going to do? We're going to replace the ball right under where that ball was, because the ball is on the putting green, so now we won't be dropping it. There are times to drop a ball on the putting green, but this is not one of them. You would replace it. Okay, no penalty, of course. Are there any questions about any of these things, about obstructions or movable, in or on, or when you don't find it? If you don't find the ball, say the ball happens to end up in a movable obstruction, and you have reason to know that that ball is actually in there, then you don't actually have to find it. You can proceed under the rule anyway, by substituting another ball, and no penalty. Okay, we can move on. Now here's an overview of ball or ball marker helping or interfering, which they can do. All right, and here's our overview. We won't spend too much time on that because it just tells us what we're going to look at. So we can go ahead. Now, here's a ball serving as a backstop. And you're going to encounter this when you're playing, when you're out there. You've hit your ball up there, and your ball is serving as a backstop for another player. This applies when two balls are on the putting green at this point, that they're helping play. They are helping play. If it's your ball, you may mark and lift it. And if it's another player's ball, you may ask that other player to mark and lift that ball if you think it's going to help anybody else. Now in stroke play, if two players agree to leave that ball there as a backstop, like one player agrees to leave it there for the other player as a backstop to help them out, and both players agree to it, and a stroke is made, the players are going to get the general penalty. And we know that the general penalty is 2 strokes. Now, if you're required to lift your ball, let's say your ball is on the putting green, somebody asks you to mark it, you can always go and play it first. You can immediately go and play it, but you don't get to mark it. You must walk up and just play it. That's a rule that a lot of folks don't know about. Normally, you'd be marking the ball. In match play, this says the opponents may agree to leave the helping ball in place. I don't know why an opponent would do that. I wouldn't want to be helping my opponent, but the rules tell you that you can do that. Are there any questions about what we discussed there, about the ball helping or interfering with play? Okay. Now this is what we encounter this quite often. This has to do with interference. One ball is interfering with another ball. Now, of course, the player whose ball is ready to play can ask the other player to mark the ball, since it interferes. And if it's close enough to distract the player, can also ask him to do that. But you can't just walk up and mark your ball if you think it would be interfering with another player. You have to be asked to do it. The player would hang on a second, I need to get my glasses. This player next to play can require the interfering ball to be marked. We can continue. And the interfering ball may be played first. Okay, and the ball may not be, in this situation, when someone asks you to pick the ball up because it interferes, you cannot clean it. So what you need to do, if you have to do that, let's say you have 2 balls in a bunker and they're close to one another, such that one of the balls has to be moved. When you pick that ball up, you want to hold it because it's interfering with play. You want to hold it in 2 fingers, so you don't give the impression that you are cleaning it. Okay. Now, if a ball, it's the same thing with a ball marker. If it's your ball marker, you can move it out of the way. If it belongs to another player, you can require them to move it. And we know how this works on the green, and it could work that way any place. Allison, can I make this screen a little bit bigger?
Yeah, if you go up towards the top of your screen,
Just go right here.
and you kind of click on the file, it'll have like a zoom option.
All right. Hang on. Okay. I'm good. Okay.
All right.
So now we go on. Any questions about that for anyone? Now we're going to talk about abnormal ground course conditions. And we're moving along a little fast. Can we?
Oh,
okay.
yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
I wasn't sure if you wanted to go over the overview or just kind
of. Well, you know what? There's 4 abnormal ground conditions. There's ground under repair. Those are places that maybe the greenskeeper has to work on. Then there are temporary water. There's animal holes, and then there is immovable obstructions. So now we go on. Okay, thanks. All right, and now here we have an area, obviously, of temporary water, and you get relief when your ball touches that, or when the ball is in or on it, or you would have to stand in there, or your swing would be impeded by that. Or if it's on the putting green, let's say I have a big puddle of water on the putting green, if it's on your line of play. Now, okay, and it just says that distraction alone is not considered to be interference. Okay. Now, there's 3 exceptions. Ball in a penalty area. Remember this, and you could write this down if you like. The only thing that you get relief from when your ball is in a penalty area is a movable obstruction. That's the only thing. It's just good to remember that way. Nothing else. An abnormal course condition? No. And continue. If it's not on the course, or if it's clearly unreasonable stroke to play, if you decide to take some crazy stance or stroke so that you would be standing in one of these conditions, you would not get relief. Take a big wide stance or something like that. And remember, here's our reference points, the nearest point of complete relief. And we've seen this many, many times. We recommend that you put a T down to mark that position. And then you have that club length arc going all the way around there where you're going to have to drop your ball. I think I finally got there. Okay, so now we got, it's 1 club length in the general area. You're coming out of the bunker, 1 stroke penalty. You must take complete relief. All right. Now, if you're for free relief in the bunker, you're going to take the nearest point of complete relief. Here's our ball in that casual water in the bunker. And the relief area is, as you see, just to the left there. And that's going to be our relief area, that 1 club length arc. That's where that ball is going to have to be dropped. 1 club length. In that, and it has to, for free relief, it has to stay in the bunker, and it can't be nearer the hole. And you're going to take the complete relief if possible, or if you can't, you're going to take maximum available relief. that would mean that if the whole bunker was covered with water, or if there was no place to go that wasn't closer to the hole, you could drop your ball out of, let's say, 6 inches of water into 2 or 3 inches of water. Now, if you want to take penalty, you're going to be using back on the line relief. You see that slide right there.
Yep, we're here.
Outside the bunker. Are we coinciding?
Yep, we're doing good.
All right. On any part of the course, I can go on any part of the course to get that. Now on the putting green, and this happens a lot. Here your ball is in the temporary water on the putting green. So you're going to take the nearest point of complete relief, and that's that. You see that place where the footprints are, and you're going to. This looks like a left hand. This looks like a. So it places the original ball on another. You're going to place the ball or another ball. You can, with all these things, you can substitute a ball. It must be on the putting green or in the general area. Sometimes the nearest point of relief, if your ball's on the putting green, might be off the putting green. And in that case, the ball would be placed. Now, if there's no complete relief, you're going to use the maximum available relief as the reference point, which must be on the putting green or in the general area. There's a lot of words there. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them at this point. Meaning of interference or the relief procedures under 16. Okay.
Doesn't look like we have any, so we can go ahead and move on there, Clerk.
Is Emma still with us? Emma had some wonderful questions last week. I really enjoyed them.
Yeah, it looks like Emma is not joining us today, but maybe she'll be tuning in later once we upload the recorded webinar. Oh.
Okay. So here we go. Abnormal course condition. The ball is not found. Now, we know this word is this virtual certainty thing. If you have knowledge or virtual certainty, you have the estimated point where the ball last crossed the outer edge of this abnormal condition. Okay, so if there's temporary water, you figure where the ball, you can't find it, but you do your best job of finding out where it crossed the edge to go in there. And you're going to get your nearest point from that point. That's your reference point. You're going to get your club length relief. Now, if you don't know that your ball is there, say if you come up over a hill for your tee shot, and you've hit your tee shot over the hill and you lost sight of it, now you come up and there's a big area of casual or temporary water, or maybe even ground under repair, and you can't find your ball, but there's no way to tell. Your ball could be somewhere else. So if you don't have that virtual certainty, you don't get free relief. The only thing you can do is play under the lost ball. The ball can't be played. You're going to have to take. You're going to have to take stroke and distance. Now, I think I went a little bit ahead. We talked about a no play zone. Hang on a minute. Let me go back.
No, it looks like that's the next slide.
The next slide? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go. So, okay, well, under my, there's areas on the golf course that are called no play zones, and very simple. You can't play from. You can't make a stroke from there. Otherwise, you're going to get a 2-stroke penalty. You have to take free relief from these things. Sometimes you'll even find them in a penalty area, and there are rules to cover that. Most of the time, it's flower beds, things of that nature that where the committee doesn't want players to go in there and start hacking up the flowers or making a mess. So they call that a no play zone, and you must take relief from that for free. Now we got a dangerous animal condition. Ooh, what could that be? This is going to tell you when relief is allowed. Let me show you the relief procedure for that. Here we have a nasty looking alligator or a crocodile. I don't know which. Does anybody know how to tell the difference between an alligator and a crocodile? I think that's an alligator. Now, when the animal is near the ball, it could cause serious injury. And that obviously that guy could. Oh, here's a bear. Wow. So it could be a poisonous snake, could be a stinging bee, could be an alligator, fire ants. I have a lot of players talk about fire ants and looking for relief, or obviously a bear, or just anything that would be like that. Relief for that is allowed anywhere on the course. Now, this alligator here is in a penalty area. He's on the water side of the penalty area. So if your ball was there, you could take relief. And how would you do it? There's two exceptions. If it's not reasonable for you to play the stroke because of some other reason, you're going to now take the nearest point of complete relief where the dangerous animal condition doesn't exist. Okay. And you'd use that same relief that you got for the abnormal course condition. These are the rules that you would go for. Remember, we talked about how you take relief in the general area, in a bunker, must keep it in a bunker to get free relief, or on the putting green. You don't drop your place.
Clark, it looks like we may have had a question. John, did you raise your
Sure.
hand? Yeah, you can go ahead and ask. Milo? Hi, nice to meet you, Milo. What's your question?
What happens if there's bees in the bunker?
Well, bees in the bunker would be, if there were stinging bees, if these were dangerous bees, then you would get to move your ball, keeping it in the bunker for free. And that happens a lot, the bees in the bunker, I know that. If they were stinging bees, you would get just like the alligator. If there was an alligator or a bear in there, you would get to take relief in the bunker, in that same bunker. You would be able to take free relief away from the bees. Did I answer your question? Is it Milo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, if you're in a penalty area, you would take the nearest point of complete relief. Here's an alligator, once again who's in there, and it's got to be in the relief area. They have to stay in the penalty area. And Milo, I'm going to go back. Let's suppose that whole area was covered with stinging bees or fire ants or things like that. At that point, you're going to have to declare your ball unplayable, and you would have to pay a one-stroke penalty. Okay. Now you'd have one penalty stroke. You can use any of these options. You could come out of this is a penalty area. You can just play it like it's in the penalty. There's your ball next to the. You can just take another ball and play it for one penalty stroke. Any questions about that? All right. Now we're going to talk about the embedded ball. And this is one that we encounter quite often. A lot of people say it's plugged. We like to use the word embedded. And you're going to get free relief when it lies in the entire general area. But there's two exceptions. Remember, the general area, it's part of the golf course. It's one of the parts of the golf course. That's where you're going to get this relief for an embedded ball, but there's two exceptions. You're going to get relief on the putting green, because if your ball embeds on the putting green, you're going to mark it. You're going to repair the damage and replace your ball. I'm going to talk about relief procedures. And here we go. What is the meaning of embedded? That means the ball is in its own pitch mark. That means the hole in the ground of the ball creates as a result of a previous stroke, of the previous stroke. And part of the ball is below the surface of the ground. As you can see in these diagrams, ball's below the surface of the ground. Even though that ball, that lower diagram, the ball is actually, there's grass between the ball and the ground, but the ball is, part of the ball is below the surface of the ground. You see the difference there? First one is simple. This other one has grass intervening, but that ball is still considered to be embedded. Now, it's not embedded if it's been stepped on or run over by a cart, or if it's driven into the ground without being airborne. And sometimes I've seen players do that. They take a swipe at it and just hit the top of the ball and just drive it down into the ground. That would not be an embedded ball. It might have to declare that ball unplayable. Or if you drop your ball. So in other words, you're taking a drop and the ball embeds, you're not going to get free relief from that. Now, what's your reference point? This is different than it used to be. You used to have to drop the ball as close to that hole that the ball created, but this is much better now, much easier to deal with. It's that old relief area thing. And your reference point is going to be the spot right behind where the ball was embedded. See, that diagram is a very good one. And once again, you know, a lot of repetition here. It's that one club length, the one club length. And that's you're going to use, as Tom said last week, you're going to use the longest club in your bag, except your putter, to measure that arc, that half circle, that semicircle. Can't go near the hole, and you got to be, in this case, in the general area, because that's where you get relief, the only place you get relief from an embedded ball. Now, these are the exceptions for an embedded ball. A ball that's embedded in sand, or you don't get relief from that, in part of the general area, or in a part of the general area that's not cut to fairway height or less. Or you have interference from something else. And that ball might be embedded there, but you can't play it. I would defy the player to play that ball because of the fact that the tree is doing something to impede his swing. So he's not going to get free relief from that particular situation that you see there. I had to give Phil Mickelson a ruling about an embedded ball back in the 2013 PGA Championship, and if I have a little time when we're finished, I'll if you can remind me, I'll tell you about it.
I'll remind you.
Okay, so we have time. So the embedded ball, yeah, you're going to get, obviously, as I said, you're going to get free relief on the putting green. You can see that. You're just going to mark your ball, pick it up, and you're going to repair it and replace it on the repaired spot. Anybody have any questions about that? Moving through here pretty well, I think.
Yeah, doesn't look like we have any questions.
Okay. Now we're going to, there are times, as I said before, when you can't tell if your ball is embedded, or you can't tell if it might be in the ground under repair, but you can lift it now to see if it is. So you can do it anywhere. Got to follow a procedure. You're always best to call the rules official over, like this fellow here is doing. And it says, if you reasonably believe a free relief rule may apply to you, but you cannot decide without lifting your ball, you may lift your ball to see if relief is allowed. And you don't have to announce it. You used to have to make a big announcement and call your fellow competitors over, and now you don't have to do that. But you've got to mark it. You have to mark it. Remember that. Must be marked before you lift it. And you can't, in this situation, you can't clean it, except if you're on the putting green and you have a question like this. So you want to hold that ball in the two fingers. That's always the best way. You've seen that done. Just pick it up very gingerly or gently in two fingers and hold it out away from you, so that there's no idea by anyone who might be watching you that you're have it in the palm of your hand or put it in your pocket to clean it.
Hey, Clark, we might have had another question from Milo.
Sure. let's.
I didn't. I accidentally hit it.
Okay. All right. No problem. Carry on, Clark.
Okay. Don't be afraid. Okay. So okay, now if this rule applies to you, let's see if you're not entitled to relief, you're just going to put your ball back. That's pretty simple. But you can get a one-stroke penalty if, when you do this, you lift it without reasonable belief that you might be entitled to relief there, or you fail to mark its position, or you clean it. If you do any of those things, and it turns out that you don't get relief, and you have to put your ball back, you're going to be penalized, that one stroke. But there's no penalty if you are entitled to free relief and you take the relief. So this fellow now determines that his ball is embedded, and now he takes the free relief from the embedded ball, and he proceeds as we have mentioned. Any questions about that? There's a lot to take in here. I also want you to know that I've been studying these rules for 50 years, and I can still get stumped. And a lot of times when we go to do our rules workshops with very knowledgeable adults who go to these, they are sometimes they get a little confused by all this, because it takes a long time, just like learning your golf swing. It takes you quite a while to learn that golf swing. You keep progressing little by little. It's the same thing when you learn the rules. And I encourage you, if you have any interest at all, to learn the rules, to keep reading and keep and try to maybe some of the older folks who are in the class go to one of these PGA USJ rules workshops. They're great. Okay, any questions about that? All right. Have we exhausted our?
Yeah, I think that might be the end of our presentation.
Wonderful.
So Clark, I don't know if you wanted to share your story. I don't know if anyone has any questions about anything that we covered today. Or
if you have any questions about any other rule, this is a good time to ask them. Oh, before I forget, I did want to go over one more time. A lot of times, you players on the junior tour are encouraged to play a second ball if you are in doubt as to your rights under the rules. So if you have a question and you don't know you think maybe you're entitled to relief or any kind of question, you're playing stroke play and you're allowed to do it. They tell you to play a second ball, but you must. We talked about it last week. You must remember several things when you do it. First of all, let's suppose you come upon your ball and it's in a very bad area in the fairway, an area that probably should have been marked as ground under repair, and it's really lousy. Your ball is almost hard to take a swing at because of this. Now you have a question here as to whether you get relief. Probably you will get relief, but you don't know because it's not marked. It has not been marked. The committee missed it. The first thing you must remember is you must not make a stroke at the ball until you announce the fact that you're going to play two balls. That's the first thing you have to do. You have to announce the fact you're going to play two balls. The second thing you have to do is you have to announce which of the balls you want to count if the committee decides that you get this free relief. So you might want to say, I'm going to play two balls here. I'm going to play the original ball as it lies, and then I'm going to take a drop under the ground under repair rule. I'm going to take a drop, and I would like the committee to grant me free relief from this drop that I'm taking. You must choose which ball you want to have score if the rules permit. And the third thing you have to do is you must report whatever happened to the committee. And you have to, if you don't report it to the committee, you will be disqualified. So I just want you to know that, and I know that our rules officials will go over it with you many, many times so that you don't get into trouble with this particular playing 2-ball rule. Okay, so that's enough said about that. But are there any other? Do you have any other questions about any kind of rule that you might want to ask me? You still on there, Allison?
Yeah, I'm still here, just waiting to see if anyone raises their hand.
Good. Okay. Well, if I'll tell you my story about Phil Mickelson. I'm left-handed. He's my favorite golfer, obviously. So this was in, I think, the second round of the PGA Championship at Kiowa Island, at the Ocean Course at Kiowa Island. I was on the 10th hole in the drive zone. And Phil came by, and I watched him, and I didn't quite see where his ball went when he played his ball to the green. But I got called up to the green for a rules question. So I went up there, and there was, I could see the cameras were rolling, and Gary McCord was talking about the situation. And I went over to Phil Mickelson and I asked him how, if I could help him. And he said, my ball is over here in this area, and do I get relief? It's embedded. Well, the ball was you don't get relief, as we mentioned before, you don't get relief from a ball that's in a sandy area. You do get relief. At this particular point, you got relief from a ball that was in a grassy area. And at this point, this goes back to 2013. The rule is a little bit different. And but you did not get relief from sand. But his ball was in an area that had sand and grass. And I was a little unclear as to how to rule. And so I said, I think I'm going to call. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to get some help. So I went on the walkie-talkie, and I got some help. And I came back, and of course, we ruled that he was not entitled to relief. And he said, well, that doesn't matter. He said, no problem. He said, I'll just play it anyway. And he went in there and hit this ball, which was in a terrible lie, about 4 feet from the hole. And the reason I mentioned it is because as rules officials, we're always supposed to stay out of the limelight. We're supposed to stay out of the camera, stay off the television as much as we can. But when I moved over to get this help, I moved out of Phil's earshot to get help. I was on there so long that one of my members made a videotape of it. I received a lot of interesting comments from my fellow rules officials who thought that I was trying to be a movie star. At any rate, that's my story about Phil Mickelson.
Well, you'll have to share the video with me, Clark. Love to see it.
I will. It's
Okay.
good. Any other questions at all?
I actually have a question about that. Is that because you have to look at the 5 areas? At that point, it was 4 areas of the golf course, and there's, the order that they're in? Yeah,
the situation at Kiowa Island, and you'll see it coming up soon this year, is that there are no bunkers on the golf course. They look like bunkers, but we don't play them as bunkers. We play them as, well, in those days, we called it through the green. They're now considered to be part of the general area. Okay, so the relief situations would be almost the same, but you still don't get relief from an area like that is not in an area that's cut to fairway height. For example, if your ball was in a divot, a sand-filled divot in the fairway, and it was embedded, you would get relief from that. But in this case, this is not in that type of area. This is in an area where which is not cut to fairway height, so there was no relief. In this case, I was unclear about it because the fact that it wasn't all sand. There was grass there, and I thought maybe he might be entitled to relief, and we had never covered that. So in our pre-tournament ruminations that we go through. So that's why I had the question. My mistake was when he asked me if I was sure of my ruling. I said I was almost positive, and I should have said I was positive and that would have stopped everything. But he asked me to find out.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Does
on,
anyone
guys.
have any questions?
Is Mr. Karpus on the line with us today?
He is not. It looks like Tom wasn't able to join us today.
Okay. He was playing golf today at Marion. He was having a nice time at Marion.
I would be enjoying that too. It's a nice day out there.
Definitely. Well, I want to thank you all. I want to thank all the juniors and the parents for the time that you have spent with me. It was a pleasure to help you. And if you have any questions, contact the section. We'll be glad to get back to you about anything about the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you guys have any questions, feel free to email info@Philly Junior Tour. We'll definitely get back to you. And if not, we'll check in with Clark if we don't know the answer to something and get that answer to you in one way or another. But I do want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Again, this recording will be posted on the Philadelphia PGA section's YouTube page. So if you want to go back and reference any of the rules that we went over today, you will be able to do that, as well as take a look back at session 1. Just a reminder, we do have our junior golf night coming up next week on April 15th. So if you guys are interested, registration is open until this Friday. But other than that, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you out on the junior tour soon.